All right, India and the European Union today signed the mother of all deals in India's national capital. India and the European Union have finalized free trade agreements, marking a major milestone in bilateral ties when it comes to India and the European Union. Now, the deal will gradually reduce tariffs on 96% of exports from both the sides. Prime Minister Modi described the pact as India's largest and most ambitious trade agreement, saying that it lays the foundation for shared prosperity between India's 1.4 billion people and Europe. Meanwhile, EU President Ursula von der Leyen said that the partnership goes beyond trade, enhancing security and resilience in an increasingly uncertain world, and also announced the launch of the first ever India-EU security and defence partnership, marking a historic shift in bilateral ties. Let's now take you through the key highlights of the mother of all deal, which is what it is being hailed as. Let's now first tell you why this deal matters. Of course, we know it was making for almost 2 decades at 18 plus years. But first up, a historic deal after 20 plus years of talks. After 2 decades of talks, this deal has been signed today. Then, now India and the European Union were partners, strategic partners since 2004. Now, the trade ties between India and the EU, it dates back to 1962. Not just that, like I mentioned, that their trade ties, it shifts back to 1962. Apart from this, the bilateral trade is at $136 billion. That is in 2024 and 2025. I would ask the producer to shift to the next page. We're talking about the bilateral trade, which is at $136 billion. That's in the fiscal year 2024-2025. Then, the deal which we're talking about, it aims to cut tariffs. That's 96% tariffs. It aims to cut tariffs and ease barriers when it comes to trading between India and the European Union. Not just that, also boost to services and supply chains. Not just that, it's not just about trade between India and the European Union, but also cooperation in defense and maritime security. Hence, these are all the key highlights of why it matters. Before we tell you more, listen in to what Prime Minister Modi said after he hailed this deal as the mother of all deals.
आज भारत ने अपने इतिहास का अब तक का सबसे बड़ा फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट संपन्न किया है। आज 27 तारीख है। ये सुखद संयोग है कि आज ही के दिन यूरोपियन यूनियन के 27 देशों के साथ भारत ये एफटीए कर रहा है। यह एक ऐतिहासिक समझौता हमारे किसानों, हमारे छोटे उद्योगों, इसके यूरोपियन मार्केट तक पहुंच आसान बनाएगा, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में नए अवसर पैदा करेगा और हमारे सर्विसेज सेक्टर के बीच सहयोग को और प्रबल करेगा। रक्षा और सुरक्षा सहयोग किसी भी स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप की नींव होती है और आज हम इसे सिक्योरिटी एंड डिफेंस पार्टनरशिप के जरिए औपचारिक रूप दे रहे हैं। इससे काउंटर टेररिज्म, मैरीटाइम और साइबर सिक्योरिटी में हमारी साझेदारी और गहरी होगी। यह रूल्स बेस्ड इंटरनेशनल ऑर्डर के प्रति हमारी साझा प्रतिबद्धता को भी बल देगा। इंडो पैसिफिक क्षेत्र में हमारे सहयोग का दायरा और बढ़ेगा और इसके साथ हमारी डिफेंस कंपनियां को डेवलपमेंट और को प्रोडक्शन के नए अवसर साकार करेगी। यह एफटीए भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन के बीच इन्वेस्टमेंट को बूस्ट करेगा, नई इनोवेशन पार्टनरशिप बनाएगा और वैश्विक स्तर पर सप्लाई चेन को मजबूत करेगा। यानी यह सिर्फ ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट नहीं है, यह साझा समृद्धि का नया ब्लूप्रिंट है। फ्रेंड्स, इस महत्वाकांक्षी एफटीए के साथ साथ हम मोबिलिटी के लिए भी एक नया फ्रेमवर्क बना रहे हैं। इससे भारत के स्टूडेंट्स, वर्कर्स और प्रोफेशनल्स के लिए यूरोपियन यूनियन में नए अवसर खुलेंगे। साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी में हमारा लंबे समय से एक व्यापक सहयोग रहा है। आज हमने इन महत्वपूर्ण लिंकेजेस को भी और मजबूत करने का निर्णय लिया है।
All right, let's now cut across to the MEA briefing, which is taking place right now after, of course, the historic deal signed between India and the European Union. Take a
EU
listen.
contingent, in fact, consisting of European Union military staff and the European Union naval operations, Atalanta and Aspidus, representatives from both of these operations participating in the Republic Day parade. The EU leaders also joined Rashtrapati and Prime Minister in the evening at the at-home reception at Rashtrapati Bhavan. Today, Presidents Costa and von der Leyen and Prime Minister Modi co-chaired the 16th India-EU summit. They held detailed bilateral talks both in the restricted format and in the delegation level format. Prime Minister hosted a luncheon in honor of the visiting presidents. There were several key documents that were signed and exchanged before the leaders, including, as you have all come to know by now, the joint announcement on the conclusion of the negotiations of a landmark and historic India-EU free trade agreement, and equally important security and defense partnership agreement between the two sides, and an MOU on a comprehensive framework on cooperation on mobility, among others. Prime Minister and President von der Leyen also addressed the India-EU Business Forum in Bharat Mandapam, where more than 100 CEOs from both the sides participated. The Business Forum comes at a timely moment, straight in the wake of the completion of negotiations of the India-EU FTA, because we will need the businesses on the two sides to quickly translate the intention of the FTA into concrete outcomes. The Honorable Vice President of India would also be meeting with both the distinguished guests, and later today President Costa and President von der Leyen will be calling on Rashtrapati, who will also host a banquet in honor of the visiting dignitaries. Let me very quickly give you a broad context and flavor of this visit and the outcomes thereof. The outcomes are deeply strategic in nature, and I would urge you to look at each of the outcomes for its specific significance in the overall scheme of things between India and the European Union. Over the last decade, relations between India and the European Union have grown steadily. They have grown not just in scale, but in significance as well, as evidenced from the level and the frequency of contacts and engagements between the two sides. In our fast-changing world, the strategic partnership between India and the EU has a value beyond the bilateral context, particularly as we witness shifts in the global economic, technological, and strategic landscape. As the world's second and fourth largest markets, India and the EU also have very high stakes on all critical global challenges of the day, including overdependence and concentration of global manufacturing and supply chains on a limited set of geographies, an ineffective multilateral system, emerging multipolarity, and growing protectionist tendencies in different parts of the world. And therefore, as two large pluralistic democracies and open market economies, our leaders have resolved to take this very strategic partnership forward for mutual benefit and for the greater good of the global population as a whole. Our relations got a very big boost last year with the historic visit of the EU College of Commissioners, which facilitated a whole-of-government approach to our most immediate priorities, which include some of the outcomes today. And in fact, we've seen very substantial outcomes today, underlining the strategic importance that both sides attach to the bilateral relationship and to further elevating the India-EU strategic partnership. Today's summit, the 16th India-EU summit, was held after a gap of about 5.5 years, and as I said, it is a milestone not only in terms of the outcomes, but also the quality of the outcomes, but also their numbers and the potential impact that they have. The leaders announced the successful conclusion of negotiations of the India-EU FTA. Trade and economic ties are central to this strategic partnership. EU as a bloc is one of the largest bilateral trading partners of India. Bilateral trade in 24-25 was close to $136 billion, with Indian exports of $76 billion and imports of $60 billion. Services trade between the two sides is around $83 billion. The FTA that was whose negotiations were concluded and announced today will have a transformative role. Beyond boosting bilateral trade, they will boost investment, strengthening of supply chain integration, and support of sustainable growth on both sides. It is important to note that despite these obviously impressive numbers that are already there in the bilateral context, there has always been enormous room for growth in the bilateral relationship, room that was hitherto unexplored and which will now be leveraged to mutual benefit by the two sides. A second very important outcome of today's meeting, especially in the overall strategic context of the relationship, is the EU-India Security and Defence Partnership, which was signed in exchange today. While we have defence and security partnerships with several individual EU member states, this framework agreement on security and defence issues between India and the EU will be a first. It will bolster our engagements in maritime security, on defence industry, on cyberspace, and on counterterrorism. Particularly, this would allow Indian defence companies to benefit from the opportunities arising from the EU's own very significant defence initiatives that are underway. The two sides have also announced the launch of negotiations for a security of information agreement, which again demonstrates the long-term and strategic view that the two sides are taking of their relationship. A third outcome that I would want to invite your attention to is the document towards 2030, an India-EU Joint Comprehensive Strategic Agenda, which is a new roadmap to reinforce our strategic partnership and set the trajectory for advancing the relations across multiple pillars. These pillars include prosperity and stability, technology and innovation, security and defense, connectivity, and people-to-people ties for the next 5 years. I would urge you to go into the details of this particular roadmap to see the depth of intensity and the breadth of coverage that we intend to bring to this relationship. Finally, the two sides also concluded an MOU on comprehensive framework on cooperation on mobility. This is again the first such mobility-related agreement that we are concluding at the EU level with any partner. For the EU, this is a first with any partner for them. The MOU will facilitate and streamline safe, regular migration, support skill development, and ease the movement of highly skilled workers, students, researchers, and seasonal workers who happen to be in occupations in demand between the two sides. The two leaders, in fact, emphasized that some of the strongest relationships between the two sides, between India and Europe, are built by the people-to-people contacts. Today, the Indian diaspora in the EU is over 1 million people. Indian professionals in Europe are making notable contributions in several fields, including information technology, healthcare, engineering, and finance. There are more than 100,000 Indian students in Europe who continue to pursue higher education in leading universities in the EU. In addition to these agreements that I have outlined, there were a number of other important understandings that were reached. This includes the announcement of projects under the India-EU trilateral partnership, the renewal of the India-EU agreement for scientific and technological cooperation until 2030, the administrative arrangement on advanced e-signatures and seals, an MOU between the Reserve Bank of India and the European Securities and Market Authority, an administrative arrangement on cooperation in disaster risk management, and again, very, very importantly, a decision to launch exploratory talks on the association of India with Horizon Europe. Horizon Europe is the world's largest public scientific research program, and India's association with this program can bring us great benefits in the future. In addition, we've constituted an India-EU task force on green hydrogen and set up a EU pilot legal gateway office in India to enhance skill mobility and launch of negotiations, as I said earlier, for an India-EU security of information agreement. So to conclude, the visit of Presidents Costa and von der Leyen to India is emblematic of our trusted and strategic partnership. We are confident that this visit will instill further momentum to deepening of India-EU ties, create more business opportunities, lead to job creation and intensified cooperation in education and scientific research, opportunities for students, enhanced mobility for professionals and highly skilled workers, and open a new chapter in security and defense cooperation between India and the EU. I want to end by citing two quotations from the leaders at the meeting. President von der Leyen said that the world is waiting for more from EU and India. So this was really
Right, and that was India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri laying out the contours of India-EU Free Trade Agreement, which was signed today after nearly 2 decades. He further laid out the plan of the EU contingent throughout the day, and he emphasized that the outcomes of this trade deal are perhaps going to be significant and also major. He goes on to say that in a fast-changing world, this deal between India and the European Union perhaps gives out a signal to the world and to the global world order. There were some major statements, some phrases which were also passed when the deal was signed, with Prime Minister Modi hailing it as the mother of all deals. And Ursula von der Leyen also there saying that we have done it. Prime Minister Modi, before we go ahead, listen in to what the EU chief Ursula von der Leyen said after signing this historic deal between India and the European Union.
Prime Minister, distinguished friend, we did it. We delivered the mother of all deals. We are creating a market of 2 billion people. And this is the tale of two giants, the world's second and fourth largest economies. Two giants who choose partnership in a true win-win fashion. A strong message that cooperation is the best answer to global challenges. This trade will integrate further our supply chain and strengthen our joint manufacturing power. It will cut up to 4 billion euros in annual tariffs for exporters of all sizes. And it will create good jobs for millions of workers here in India and in Europe. At the same time, this agreement will build on the natural complementarity of our economies. It brings together Indian skills, services, and scale with Europe's technology, capital, and innovation. It will create levels of growth that neither side can achieve alone. And by combining these strengths, we reduce strategic dependencies at a time when trade is increasingly weaponized. As we conclude this 16th summit, let me reflect on another event of deep meaning. 2 weeks ago, India marked Makar Sankranti. It's the beginning of Uttarayan, the sun's northward journey. From darkness to light, from stillness to growth, from what was to what can be. And that is what makes our summit so unique and timely. The time is right for renewal, for fresh momentum, and for opening a new chapter in EU-India friendship. And this is exactly what we have achieved together today.
Piyush Goyal, our Commerce Minister, speaking right now. This is, of course, on the historic India-EU Free Trade Agreement. Let's just cut across live to him.
Which has further been strengthened with colleagues from almost all parts of government in both the European Union and India. Everybody playing their role to prepare the roadmap and lay the foundation for a very powerful economic, geopolitical, and strategic partnership of the 21st century. We are also very pleased to have concluded negotiations on, as Ms. von der Leyen herself has articulated, the mother of all deals, a free trade agreement which covers 25% of global trade. It is our 8th free trade agreement under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, each and every one of them with developed nations and collectively reflecting an agreement between India and 36 developed nations. With these 27 of the European Union, 4 from the EFTA, 31 and 6 more, 37 developed nations and India have entered into free trade agreements in a short span of 4 years under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Friends, this breakthrough in the EU-India trade relations comes after 20 years. You're all aware the discussions were launched in 2006. 16 rounds of negotiations were held. Sadly, in 2013, efforts were aborted and almost nobody ever imagined the European Union and India being able to come up with such a robust partnership framework as has been finalized by our leaders today. In fact, when we relaunched negotiations in mid-2022 and laid the initial foundational work, prepared our game plan and way forward, we had elections in India and then in the European Union through 2024. So the heavy lifting for this FTA really started after the historic visit of the European Union Trade Commissioners led by Ms. von der Leyen in February 2025. And I think it's been the labor of love of the entire government in European Union and India, burning the midnight oil, persevering, working in a spirit of cooperation, India negotiating with self-confidence, both sides agreeing to focus on what is good for both set of countries, the European Union and India, leaving the sensitive issues aside, and therefore coming up with a very balanced, equitable and fair free trade agreement, which is a win-win for all sections of industry, both in India and European Union, opening up plethora of opportunities for investment, opening up markets which are complementary, with India gaining access significantly in labor-intensive industries like marine products, chemicals, footwear and leather, plastic rubber goods, textiles, apparel and clothing, gems and jewelry, furniture, sports goods, toys, and the European Union industries gaining access to the large and fastest growing economy of India in innovation, technology, sectors of precision engineering, and areas where India continues to look for partnerships and technologies from across the world. Friends, this agreement covers almost 99% of the total exports that are sent from India to the European Union, and about 97% plus of the total exports from the depth of this agreement. We have tried to address the asymmetry in economic development between the two nations, with different per capita incomes, with transitional periods, but ultimately focusing on the complementary strengths of both economies, such that all 28 countries will stand to benefit. Collectively, the European Union today imports nearly $6.5 trillion worth of goods and nearly $3 trillion worth of services. India plays a very small role in that. Our total exports are currently just about 1.5% of the goods import into Europe, and barely 2.5% of the services import into Europe. With this massive opening up of opportunities, the European Union has also opened up many new sectors. India has opened up many new sectors in the services space. We can see a big thrust to the services sector. As I said, on marine products, almost 94% of the tariff lines and almost the entire value of goods that are exported are going to get duty-free access. As I said before, areas like textiles, apparel, home decor, furnishing, where India has very serious labor-intensive interests, 100% of the European market will be open for business from day one. And I can give you more details, but we have furnished those details to all the members of the press, whether it's furniture and lighting or other consumable goods. Almost all of our exports are going to get duty-free access from day one. Likewise, for toys, for sports goods, for railway components, aircraft parts, also in leather and footwear. These are areas which are of significant interest to India. Similarly, India will open its doors for greater import of auto components, automobiles, wines, spirits, and other areas of interest to the European Union, with both sides having ensured that sensitive items are kept out of the ambit or given sufficient transition period for adjustment of the industry and economic cycles. For example, from the context of the European Union, their interest was more in larger automobiles, since they do not make automobiles which are under 15 or 20,000 euros in big measure. We in India produce largely automobiles which are smaller in size and lower in cost. So we've been able to come to a very amicable understanding where the auto industry in Germany is very happy, getting greater access in a phased manner in areas of their interest, while Indian industry is very happy that we've been able to protect their areas of interest in the smaller and low-cost automobile sector.
And well, that was India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, perhaps laying out the nitty-gritties of the free trade agreement signed between India and the European Union earlier today. He goes on to say, he lays down the contours and he says that India-EU FTA will cover 25% of global trade, perhaps reducing tariffs for 96% of exports, further hailing this deal as a mother of all deals ever, which wasn't making for around 2 decades.